Good morning, Bitcoiners. It is day 60 of Citadel Summer. This is Citadel Daniel. Daniel from the Bitcoin Citadel. Here we are. Today, the topic of the day, I'm calling it, What's Your Story? And the reason I'm pondering this, the reason I'm going to riff on this topic is because the last couple of days I've talked to several people who are new to Bitcoin. They're thinking about Bitcoin, and they asked me about it, because I'm the Bitcoin guy, right? And this channel, this experiment, this project of Citadel Summer, I wasn't really intending it to be a channel to orange pill people, to get people to to embrace Bitcoin, to flip from a no coiner to a new coiner, to become a Bitcoiner or start their journey, their Bitcoin journey. But the funny thing is the last couple of people that have scheduled time with me, link in the description, have been people who are new to Bitcoin. And I ran into a friend of mine at a concert the other day, and he asked me about Bitcoin. And then I had cigars and bourbon with a friend of mine last night, and he is thinking about Bitcoin, right? I was like, man, I don't have an elevator pitch for people who are new to Bitcoin. So I talked and I, brought up some stuff. I talked about absolute scarcity. Why is Bitcoin valuable? That was a question that came up. Why is this thing valuable? Why are people drawn to it? Why do people think this is a good store of value? Why do you think, this is a place where people can, because everyone's concerned about themselves, right? Where I can put my time and energy. Why is it better than just having, stacks of $100 bills under my bed, or, equity stocks or bonds, or buy houses, Why Bitcoin? And they're curious, but they don't really know the answer. And I was like, so I didn't have a good story for it. And it brings to mind, and I got to reread it. My friend Nolan wrote a really good book, and it's called, two books actually, that about, that I think are relevant to this topic. One of them is called The Bitcoiner's Guide to NPC Management. And it's about different kinds of NPCs, people who are just walking through the world, right, without really engaging with it fully. People who are non-player characters, if you're not familiar with the term NPC. And how do you recognize NPCs? And really the subtext is, how do you get them hooked into Bitcoin? And one of the things that I forgot, because that really is a good book, and I think it is, I'm gonna have to reread it, because I think it's gonna be a great way to turn people on to Bitcoin and get them started on the journey. He says the first question you should ask is, how did you first hear about Bitcoin? What was your first encounter with Bitcoin? And the answer to that question will allow you to categorize people into a type of NPC. And there's a whole bunch of different ones. Sports ballers, credentialists, it's got the classic Nolan Bowerly humor, but, also on point. So if you read it, you really, it's a great guide. That's what it is. It's a guide to NPC management. My favorite part of the whole thing is, at the end, he says that even we Bitcoiners are NPCs about some things. And you've kind of seen that the last couple of days, where the whole Bitcoin, you know, social media landscape has gone topsy-turvy because Bitcoin has dropped a couple percent, and sailors, MSTR is below the 200-day moving average, and people are losing their minds right now. So I thought about that this morning, and I'm like, I need a story. I need a way of engaging with people when they come to me. And I thought people would be coming to me because they wanted to, learn how to set up their cold card. You know what I mean? Or learn how to set up a Start9 server, that kind of thing. But it's really kind of deeper than that, because this is the Great Awakening, right? And people are waking up to the fact that fiat money denominated by nothing but proof of weapons, right? Or the dictate of a government is over. Max Kaiser and I are on the same page here. Bitcoin is a separation of money and state, and the nation state is over. There's a fork in that ass, right? It's done. And we're just watching watching things spin apart and the wreckage start to land on the ground at this point in slow motion. It's not going to be slow motion forever, though. It's accelerating as we speak. Things are happening, my friends. Things are happening. And I think for Bitcoiners, buckle in. I agree with Rustin from Simply Bitcoin about this one. Is this fall is going to be very eye-opening. I think that, where we are now is going to test the conviction of many Bitcoiners, people who are in Bitcoin as traders and who don't understand Bitcoin and are just into it because this is the latest and greatest thing, and they're coming from the XRP world, right? Are going to be in for a real ride, because I think it's not unlikely that we're going to see a dip before the explosion, right? Before the real swing into the parabolic rise and the blow off top of Bitcoin in the cycle, before it comes back down again, and before we enter the next Bitcoin winter, like we always do. Where the signs, there are signals, there are signs, and if you can read the signals and the signs, if you look at those tea leaves, it's not that hard to understand that this is possible, and that the best strategy, as always, is stay humble and stack sats, or like what I like to say is find a way of acquiring Bitcoin and find a way of holding on to that Bitcoin. So what's your story? What's your story? I need to come up with a story for people. In the comments, if you have any recommendations, for a good story, let me know. My story is going to be, I'm going to go back to Nolan's book, his guide to NPC management. And I'll try to find a link to that and put it in the show notes. It's, I think it's on YouTube actually. And I'll link to maybe I'll link to the first episode, and you can find your way through from there. But I do need a story. I do need an elevator pitch. I do need that 5-minute hook for people to get them to understand Bitcoin. But I do think it's different for everybody. My friend that I was talking to at the concert on Sunday, he's a sports baller guy, right? But he's also a guy who he becomes obsessed with things one at a time, and he really goes off for a deep dive on them, and he learns everything about them. He practices. He actually engages with the thing that he's interested in, and he becomes really proficient at it. And he likes the gear, and he likes to tinker, and he likes to really peel the onion. And I was like, dude, Bitcoin's perfect for you. And I think I actually made a lot of progress with him when I took this approach. You're going to love it if you get into it, because you can study it and you can take a deep dive and you can actually meet the players. He likes to meet the players, right? He likes to meet the people who are moving and shaking and get a relationship with them. And he's really good at it too. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was like hanging out on Sailor's boat in a year. You know what I mean? And then another person I talked to, she's an older woman, right, who's curious about Bitcoin. She's even older than me, if you can believe that, right? And she was really, really smart, and she was asking such good questions about it. Um, and she was kind of leading me down the path, and I fortunately had some pretty good answers, I think, for her. And I turned her on. I said, this person is perfect for Raj's videos. So I gave her a link to Rajat Soni's YouTube channel and the samurai of the spreadsheet. I was like, dude, this is the one for you. You know, watch Rajat's videos and you'll get it. That was her kind of type, right? And I hope she does. Everyone asks me for a book. What book can I read about Bitcoin? You know, a lot of people are book readers. Not my sports ball friend. He's not a book reader. He's more of a doer. You know, he just wants to get into it and learn about it. He's more of a guy like me, a video guy. You know, I am a book reader too, though. And I've been recommending Safety's, the Bitcoin Standard, for people. Let me know if you think there's a better first book for people. And I think it's going to be different for different people. And I think some people do learn from reading books, or some people do get engaged from reading books, and others not so much. So again, knowing the type of, I don't want to call them NPCs, but I want to get my categories from the Nolan's Guide to NPC Management. And, you know, I need to get my story. I need to know what my story is, right? And I think that's going to be my entree, is I'm going to look at those videos and read that book again so I can refresh my mind on this approach, because I think that is going to be my approach. You ask people what their Bitcoin origin story is, see where they fall in the, in the pre-coiner world or the NPC world, right? And then use that as a guide to getting them on the path to Bitcoin, because it's the door is starting to close, my friend. I think this is the last cycle. I've said this before, where you're going to be able to make that fiat trash token for Bitcoin trade. I think that trade is coming to a close faster than folks think. People say, am I too late? You're not. As long as that trade is available, you are not too late to Bitcoin, especially people who are older, who do have assets that they can convert into Bitcoin, right? But the journey only starts when you make that decision. I was telling another friend of mine, was asking me about Bitcoin and really is into it. You know, I talked to one of my brothers about Bitcoin recently. They're into it, but I said, you need to understand Bitcoin, because if you don't understand Bitcoin, when it blows off or when it drops, you're going to lose conviction, and you're going to sell it either at a loss or for a gain, right? That's a taxable event, and you won't have your Bitcoin anymore, right? Until you understand it, it really doesn't make sense to hold Bitcoin. Once you do understand it, you could say, like, why did it take me so long to understand, right? And you're gonna want to hold on for dear life, right? You're going to hodl. I'm not sure you're going to stay humble and stack sats right away, because people do get excited about trading. Even me, an 80 IQ pleb, right, who should know better, gets tempted by that occasionally. I think I'm over that this at least this week. I think I'm content to stay humble and stack sats today, right? And it's every day I need to remind myself of that. My wife is great now, because she'll just throw that in there when it drops or when it goes up. Stay humble and stack sats, you know. And I don't need Odell anymore. I got my wife that's going to remind me of that. What's your story? And the story is not the same for every person, you know. Everybody has their own story, the key to unlock, the door that's going to open up and let them walk through and start to engage with Bitcoin, develop that conviction, and move down the path, move forward on their Bitcoin journey. But now is the time. So it's not too late. As a matter of fact, until that trash token for real money trade, and still until the door closes on that, until the equivalent of Nixon closing the gold window in 1971, someone's going to close the Bitcoin window at some point, and it's going to be a lot harder to get it, right? You won't be able to make that trash token trade. until that door closes, it's not too late. And even then, it's probably not too late. There's going to be other ways of attaining Bitcoin. It's just going to be a lot more difficult to get a good stack, right? Until that day, probably I'm saying in the next cycle, it's not going to be this cycle, and the next cycle happens, you're not too late. And I myself am going to come up with not a single story, but with, multiple stories. How did you first hear about Bitcoin? What was your first experience with Bitcoin? That's the question. That's what I got to remind myself when I get into that situation. That's the question I got to ask, and I got to listen to them. And that's when I'm going to reach back and pick the story I'm going to use to, help people to engage with Bitcoin. Because remember, I'm a Bitcoin educator and a coach. And as a coach, you really can't tell people what to do. You can help them to kind of soul search and find out what their path is going to be. And a Bitcoin coach, folks know they want to engage with Bitcoin. How do they engage more fully with Bitcoin? How do they chart their Bitcoin journey? The last part before I go, what's your story? There's another side of the coin, as there always is. And the story that a coach helps people to come up with, to visualize as if it was their life now, is where do you want to be in 5 years? If you engaged with Bitcoin, if you started your Bitcoin journey, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Not just how big your stack is, but what is Bitcoin going to do to transform your life, right? And what does that look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Why are you starting that journey? Is it number go up? Is it freedom and sovereignty? Is it because you think a dark time is ahead and you want to have a lifeboat? What is it? Where do you see yourself? And it should be a living story. You're already there, right? This is who you are already. You're living in the future. And it's very, very vivid, right? That's really the spark that's going to get you to that place, right? Then you start your steps on your journey, on your Bitcoin journey. You start to figure out how you can make that reality, which it's already vivid and it's present for you, how that can come to fruition, right? So 2 stories. Stories you got to tell your NPC friends who want to begin their Bitcoin journey. And the other story is, what are the waypoints on your Bitcoin journey in 5, 10, 20 years? Really visualize that and live that in your mind. You're already there. You're living in that future. And just move in that direction. Take steps in that direction, So those are the 2 sides of that coin. What's your story? All right. So cigars and bourbon last night. I'm still doing good though. Look at that. The fog is starting to lift. I took a time lapse this morning. I don't know if you guys ever look at my X channel, but I if there's a nice sunrise, I post a time lapse, and I took one this morning before I started my video, because it was so foggy. When I started this video, it was so foggy. I was like, fog of war video, what can we do? And I usually do my little morning routine before I shoot the video if it's like that. And I did that this morning, and I took a time lapse, and of course the time lapse was just a gray, it was just gray fog over the lake. But now it's starting to lift. That's pretty cool, right? It looks pretty good. It's going to be a great day. It's always a great day, right? It's always a great day in Bitcoin. Highs, lows, ups, downs. It's always a great day in Bitcoin. I will talk to you tomorrow. It's going to be day 61. Can you believe it? Day 61 tomorrow of the Citadel Summer. I have no idea what I'm going to be talking about, but I will be talking to you tomorrow. Till then, peace.